Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for coming today, and staying awake today. The last two conferences I've presented at, I was the speaker that was on about an hour and a half or 2 hours after lunch. And I don't know why it is that I get that slot, but here I am again. So hopefully the diurnal rhythm is kind of coming back from its nadir. And just to entice you a little, I'm going to take a run at trying to define access in hopefully a digestible way. So that's the special bonus for you if you stick around. What I'm going to focus on, you can see as the title slide here, is innovation in reputation and pricing to bolster neglected tropical disease policy. We think of innovation in biopharma primarily around developing the science, the technology, the molecules, the biologics, the diagnostics, and so on. But innovation can come in various different forms. This company, KaloBios, and we do need to change the name, and we will change the name, has had a dreadful reputation in the Chagas community. We have made some strides in order to repair and rehabilitate that. And part of what I'm going to show you is some of the thinking behind how we've gone about doing that, and hopefully some of that resonates, and certainly be very interested in receiving questions in the Q&A. So company reputation is a big deal. It's a big deal personally. Personal reputation is important. And I think, as we know, reputation takes a long, long time to build, and it can go just like that. And then in order to repair it, you have a lot of difficulty because that is an uphill battle. So it says here, somewhat whimsically, just ask us. We know about that, and we can share with you some of the lessons we've learned. One of the things that we think is really important now is the conversation around pricing. And we put out a responsible pricing model almost a year ago. It was actually April the 11th, so we're coming up to our first year anniversary. And at the time, it was, in the biopharma community anyway, somewhat ridiculed. I remember having conversations with my peers and colleagues, other CEOs, about that. And look at today and a few months ago where pharmaceutical pricing is. It is very firmly on the agenda, and it is not going to go away. So we'll talk more about that. We believe that the priority review voucher policy that Jeff took us through not only is effective, but it can be made even better with responsible pricing. We've seen bad actors in a number of spheres, but when that also happens in neglected tropical disease world, it magnifies and amplifies that bad behavior. And it is completely unacceptable. Biopharma should be and is in the business of making people's lives healthier, better, longer, more productive. That's our business. So our turnaround, you can see this kind of U shape. So if you go to the left, the grey box, this company had difficulties with its pipeline projects. They were winding down the company. Martin Shkreli, you all know who he is, came in, put in an investment. He was CEO for 3 weeks and 5 days. He got arrested. The company took a nosedive if it wasn't bad enough. And so had filed for Chapter 11 and was delisted by NASDAQ. So I joined as a board member. You see kind of to the bottom, that's our diurnal dip, right, corporately speaking. So I came in as one of the board members and then took on the CEO role. Coming into something as messy as that, and I had to reflect very hard personally, why do it at all? In some ways, coming into a company that was delisted, the former CEO had been arrested, it was bankrupt, it didn't have a pipeline, management had scattered, the board had left, it had no money. I thought, even I can't make this much worse. Though seriously, what I thought was, there's an opportunity. The products are important. There's an opportunity to bring important products to patients. Secondarily, if we can do that, having been perceived as a very bad actor, and rehabilitate our own image in some small way, that helps start to reclaim some of the lost ground in terms of the public's perception of biopharma. To my point about what biopharma should be about. And finally, I just thought that personally it would be interesting from a personal growth and professional development point of view. I could never imagine the intensity, the challenges, the daily opportunities to improve that have been thrown at us. And it is relentless. I worked in some pretty busy jobs as a physician. Probably the busiest job was when I was doing obstetrics and gynecology. I did a postgrad in obstetrics and gynecology. I like to work hard. I think work ethic is important. And I've never worked as hard under such intense pressure as in this incarnation of the last 15 months. And neither have I felt so personally rewarded in many ways. And perhaps that's part of the trade-off. Things that are worth gaining and accomplishing really come through hard work, sacrifice, and persistence. So we think we're further on the way up. We eradicated a whole load of nonsense. We cleaned up. We came out of bankruptcy. We raised a bit more money. We did a deal to solidify our access to benzonidazole from Savant. We got current with our filings. We had an excellent FDA meeting on December 6th. And you may have seen this morning, we issued a press release which speaks to our intent to submit the IND for benzonidazole at the end of May. And we would hope to submit the NDA 1 year or so from now, so by the end of March or very soon thereafter. So we would hope to see an approval sometime next year. And that is coupled with our responsible pricing model, which I'm going to talk to you about in a moment. So just this is some of the team that I brought in, with the exception of one person who'd been there just for a couple of months before I came along. And I guess the point of this, and I'm not going to run through everyone's experience, but good things only happen when good people are involved. You have to have excellence with the leadership, and what you have here, and I guess you have to take my word for it, is people who are very experienced. 4 of these people have been CEOs of other companies. Very committed, very hardworking, and the critical thing, we operate by a very simple corporate rule. We have one rule in the company, and it's got 2 words. No politics. We don't game each other. We don't look to undermine each other. We don't look to claim other people's work as our own. We just don't do that. We've been in organizations and circumstances where that seems to be the corporate culture. In fact, where people are rewarded for playing that way. We don't do that. We focus on getting things done. So I talked about the responsible pricing model, and some of you know about this, but I think it does bear repetition, and so please excuse me. But it hinges on 3 key elements, and those are highlighted in the green font. So it's affordability for patients and payers, transparency for stakeholders, and a reasonable return. So we intend to price our products at whatever the overall cost winds out being, and a transparent, reasonable profit margin. So who decides what's reasonable? Well, actually, a bunch of the people here will. So this is not like traditional pharma, with my apologies to colleagues from other big pharma companies that are here, where generally, though not always, and this is changing, pricing is set to as much as the market will bear for new innovations. We're not doing that. We're going to have essentially a cost-plus model. And so, if this thing costs $2,000 to make, you can't really sell it for $1,500. But should you sell it for $20,000? Probably not. We want to move to a place where our end customers, patients, treating physicians, policy formers, advocacy groups, and others tell us what constitutes reasonable. And you can imagine that when this came out a year ago, some people in pharma were not too happy about where this might go. This is where it's going. Transparency is happening. And transparency means transparency. It doesn't mean selective transparency. So we'll only show you a little bit over here. Or it's someone else's fault, go look over there. That great distraction technique. I think we're seeing a bit of that in other spheres right now. The distraction technique is over. People can see through that too. That lack of transparency is transparent. So some of the other things, and on the right you see a couple of what we won't do. We're not going to take arbitrary price increases. We're not going to engage in price gouging. We don't wish to be value extractors that are doing that without having contributed value and created value. So we'll talk a bit about access and also making benznidazole available in other countries. What's been, I guess, gratifying is that a number of other companies have picked up on some elements of this and are articulating their own version of it. And I guess, if imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, we consider ourselves extremely flattered in the sense that this has become an issue that is going to have to be dealt with in a constructive way. So we believe pricing is a key thread that underlies reputation. It's around how you interact with stakeholders, and it's about policy. And I think we can all think of a number of situations where if pricing had been more thoughtful and more engaging, we would not think the way we think when I say the word EpiPen. Right? You have a reaction to that. Let's try Valiant Pharmaceuticals. You have a reaction to that too. Understandably, a year and a half ago, if I would have said KaloBios, you would have had a reaction to that. You're having a reaction to it right now. Hopefully it's a better reaction and a more thoughtful reaction, and one that wishes to engage in dialogue around what we're about and what we're trying to bring. So the headline slide was about innovation with regard to reputation. We absolutely disagree that innovation is only around molecules, biologicals, and so on. And we absolutely disagree that transformational thinking only comes from big companies and institutions. In fact, having worked in big companies for a large part of my career, I know there are great ideas that just get strangled at birth. And oftentimes, it's the smaller players, the kind of a bit edgy, a bit maverick, if you will, in a good way, that can bring those ideas. And just as almost every innovation in medicine, when it was first revealed, was ridiculed. Or worse, people were persecuted and vilified. So that's just a part of it. If it was easy, everyone would be able to do it. This is not easy. It's a struggle. There's plenty of people that want to see us fail. But we think that this is important, and we think it's a responsibility. So we think that pricing really affects the intent with the PRV. So we think neglected tropical diseases are attractive for small companies, and the incentive for us is the PRV. We don't need to charge a massive premium. it would not be right to charge a massive premium, even if we could. Even if the people weren't underinsured or uninsured, perhaps undocumented, perhaps living at or below the poverty level. Even if none of that was true, it would still not be the right thing to do with benzoidazole because we didn't do the R&D. We're doing D with a small d, getting it through the regulatory process. And I think it's interesting how this program has evolved. And again, Jeff showed a very nice summary of that. But particularly interesting that NTDs are the minority of the vouchers that have been awarded so far. It's kind of interesting. So we do think that there is an important opportunity to create, as we've written here, a new kind of company. So think of pharma and biotech. What are the transformations that would be particularly important as we wrestle with some of the massive issues that seem almost intractable? Some of it is around reputation and transformation and innovation and dialogue and cooperation. And those are some of the things we'd like to think we can help bring to the discussion table. And we have ideas about how to do R&D differently. We have ideas about how to do commercial differently. Right now, we have 17 FTEs. When I was at J&J, I was a senior executive at J&J, we had 120,000 people. Me and my band of merry soldiers can outpunch much bigger companies because we can move fast. We're not afraid to take risk. We're not afraid to get criticism. And we'll listen. And we'll evolve and change and adapt. And we'll get things done. And those are some of the kinds of models that we think are going to be at play going forward. So, clearly from a patient perspective, a number of things are important: efficacy, safety, but also access. So again, some of the criticisms around PRVs, drugs should be novel. So you see on the right some of the things that we think get in the way of that. So waiting for novelty. First of all, how long are you going to wait? Average time is 8 to 12 years, as we know. Several $100 million. If you listen to Tufts, it's more like billions of dollars for each NCE. How long are you going to wait? And in that 8 to 12 years, how many patients that could have received benefit will be denied benefit because you have to have novelty? By the way, on the assumption that novelty equates with improvement. And we absolutely know from our experience dozens of examples of brand new products that actually, in the fullness of time, we found were not improvements. In fact, they were detrimental. And what if there were perfectly useful therapies for Zika and Ebola ex-US? Would we really say, because they're not novel, we're going to deny patients in the US those therapies? That would be ridiculous and calamitous from a policy point of view. So we think that responsible access and pricing are critical. So this is a checklist, and I'm not going to read through all of this, but PRV policy, it rewards, this is the second lozenge here, commercial and non-commercial efforts. The fourth lozenge here, this is important. Some of the numbers that you've seen, the high so far was $350 million for a PRV sale. That money is private money. It doesn't come out the public purse. So why should that matter if someone is willing and able to pay for a voucher? And we understand how it places additional stress on very stretched FDA resources with the voucher being cashed in, as it were, for a compound which may not be as important to the public health. So all of these things, you can check the box, except for price and access. And we think that that's important. So Pricing, reputation, closely linked. We've actually taken steps to try and address this. So we think that the responsible pricing model is leading edge, but we would say that. It's interesting that other people have also jumped on that. And we also think that that, coupled with the right kind of PRV incentives, helps tackle the access issues. So what really is access? I just want to dwell on that for a moment. So it's difficult to get a common definition of access. So some people are pounding the table and say, you must have access, must have access. What does that mean? Probably means that the patient can get the drug, that they can get it in a way that makes sense to them, and they can get it at the right cost. So it may be that access is availability of the treatment, it's appropriateness of how the treatment is delivered, and its affordability. So for me, access hits those 3 A's: availability, acceptability, and affordability. So, and I'd like to think that we're a case in point of the final bullet here, that by tackling NTDs, and we're also looking at rare pediatric diseases, that we can take on the challenge of innovation, particularly as it pertains to pricing and access. Thank you very much. Be very interested in receiving your questions.